Algebra 2, set 110, quadratic inequalities using greater than. So if we have a situation where x is a positive number, we can represent it using x and the inequality greater than 0. And if we were to draw that on a number line, we would get graphing it with an open circle at 0 and with an arrow to the right. Now, if it was the product of two quantities, it would look like this, where you would have two things that are greater than 0. And the only way that you get two things when you multiply them greater than 0, you have to have either a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So those are your two possibilities. So we'll do some examples that make this a little bit clearer. Graph the solution on a number line of x plus 2 times x minus 3 is greater than 0. The domain is the real numbers. So again, if it's greater than 0, that means that it's positive. So our choices are either that we're going to have a positive multiplied by a positive or a negative multiplied by a negative. So we'll take x plus 2 and assume that it's greater than 0, and x minus 3 and assume that it's greater than 0. So we're assuming both of these are positive. And we'll solve. X is greater than negative 2 and x is greater than 3. Now we'll assume they're both negative, so we'll say x plus 2 is less than 0 and x minus 3 is less than 0. When we solve those, we get x is less than 2 and x is less than 3. So we have to pay attention to the ands and the ors here. When we have an and, it means that it needs to be true in both cases. So we need all of the solutions that are greater than negative 2 and greater than 3. So when we look at those put together, all of the x's that are true for both x is greater than negative 2 and x is greater than 3, we know if we start at negative 2 and go upwards, that's just the numbers that are bigger than negative 2 until you get to 3. And then once you get to 3, every number bigger than 3 is also bigger than negative 2. So x is greater than 3 is the piece that we want. It's where that overlap is. So the same thing is true over on the right side where we have an and. So we need all numbers that are less than negative 2 and also less than 3. So, for example, if I picked the number 2, 2 is less than 3, but it's not less than negative 2, so that would not be a solution. So, if I pick the number negative 5 is less than negative 2, and it's also less than negative 3, or less than 3, excuse me. So, I know that everything less than 2 is also going to be everything less than negative 2 is also going to be less than 3. So x is less than negative 2 is what I'm looking for. So those are our two solutions. We have x is greater than 3 or x is less than negative 2. We're going to draw a number line and then we'll graph. Again, our domain is real numbers, so we are going to draw an open circle at 3 and draw the arrow to the right for all numbers greater than 3. And all numbers less than negative 2, we have an open circle with an arrow to the left. Okay, one more example. Graph the solution on a number line. X squared minus 2x is greater than or equal to 3. The domain is integers. So the first thing you want to do is write this in standard form, and then we can factor it. So we know we have x at the beginning. We need two numbers that multiply to give negative 3 and add to give you 2. So those numbers are going to be negative 3 and positive 1. So we want all numbers that are less than, or x minus 3 and x plus 1, they have to be greater than or equal to 0, so it's positive. So when we have a positive, we know that we've got two positives or two negatives. So we'll look at positive times a positive, and then we'll look at negative times a negative. So x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 0, and x plus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. That would make them both positive. And then to make them negative, x minus 3 is less than or equal to 0, and x plus 1 is less than or equal to 0. So we'll go ahead and solve. We get x is greater than or equal to 3, and x is greater than or equal to negative 1. And then we get x is less than or equal to 3, and x is less than or equal to negative 1. Looking to see what's true for both, if it's greater than or equal to 3, it's also greater than or equal to negative 1. So greater than or equal to 3 is true for both. And then over on the right side, if it's less than or equal to 3, it's not necessarily less than or equal to negative 1, but if it's less than or equal to negative 1, it's definitely less than or equal to 3. So x is less than or equal to negative 1 is the solution there. So we'll write our two solutions, and then we'll graph. So now you have to be careful. Go back up to your domain. The domain is integers. So since the domain is integers, we're only going to be using dots, and we want everything that is greater than or equal to 3 and everything less than or equal to negative 1. So that is your solution.